and today we're going to be talking all about the Heist Patch Notes. So I want to say before we get into it, the patch notes are pretty light. A lot of people have been kind of disappointed by it. Keep in mind that the main content for Heist is coming in the alt gems and the replica uniques. So really wait until those get announced tomorrow before you really make your opinions. But I will say these are pretty light notes. I made my own like TLDR. Usually when I do this, I have a couple of pages. I haven't even got 2 full pages. So yeah, there's not that much in there, all that exciting. But the stuff in there which is kind of fun is such. So, best change, most exciting change. Corsico has new visuals. Yeah. We've also got permanent minions for golems, zombies, and animate guardians. So some pretty nice quality of life. There's also persistent whispers. The auto reply thing isn't lost upon transition, which is a very nice quality of life. And yeah, those are the main like really cool quality of life things. So, intensity now has a maximum stack of 3, not 4. This isn't enough. This is a buff because they've made it ramp much faster. The quality of life is much better. So yes, this is very nice for anyone who previously used intensity. I was hoping for a couple more buffs or improvements to self-cast, maybe some new self-cast nodes. But the only thing we've seen is the intensity change and a nerf to Spell Slinger, which sort of pseudo buff self-cast because they made the other options slightly worse. So next up, the projectile behavior thing. The projectile behavior stuff is really cool if you're someone who utilizes it. Most projectile builds don't, so it's something you can generally ignore. But basically, there's the projectile order, the way it goes through pierce, chain, fork, return. Before, once you got to the end of the sequence, it would just end. Like, it wouldn't go back to doing previous pierces or chains if there was some left over. Now, if your projectiles return, you could go through a pack, return back, and if there's any remaining pierces, we'll continue to pierce or chain or fork or whatever. So yeah, that's pretty cool. So yeah, it's now splitting, piercing, forking, chaining, then return. Cool if you utilize it. If you don't utilize it, who cares? Right, marks. The marks stuff looks pretty cool. This is stuff that we can talk about. If I can find it. Assassin's mark. Ah, here we go. Cool. So, marks, in case you missed it, are now separate to hexes. Curse has been split into hexes into marks. It's a bit confusing. Basically, marks only affect rares and uniques. And the mark skills are Assassin's Mark, Poacher's Mark, Sniper's Mark, which used to be Projectile's Weakness, and Warlord's Mark. They only affect rares and uniques, as I said. Enemies cursed by them have 100% increased chance to grant power charge when slain. So any rare or unique with any of the mark will 100% give you a charge. And they've also got inbuilt charge generation. So Assassin might give you power charges, Poachers give you frenzy, Warlords give you endurance. So if you were someone who played a lot of Flicker Strike, more frenzy charge generation. Nice change. Pretty cool. Otherwise, I'm going to read through all the little details. That's the main thing, which is pretty exciting. Sniper's Mark is a very fun skill. It's very interesting. So it no longer has the inbuilt pierce or knockback. Now, curse enemies take 60% increased damage from projectiles, up to 35 at level 20. Curse enemies now grant a life flask charge and a mana flask charge when you hit them, no more than once every 0.5 seconds. Very interesting. Projectiles which hit curse enemies now also split up to four additional targets, level 20. Really interesting for bosses, where you've got lots of adds around. There aren't that many bosses that have loads of ads around though, but still, it's cool. Very interesting. Also, if there's like a rare, you could like mark the rare and it'll split amongst the pack. It's very interesting. Not sure how much use it will see, but it's cool. The steel stuff I can't really evaluate because I didn't play much of the old steel skills at all, and I don't know how good the new steel mechanic will feel. So I cannot give you a verdict on if I think the new steel stuff looks good, sadly. But I'm sure some other content creators who've played more with those skills might be able to be like, yes, this looks great, or yes, this looks whatever, or we just need to wait and see. It's also going to be one of the things with the new, like, whole shard mechanic. I think you're just going to have to play it. Fortunately, if you league started with one of the shard abilities and it felt bad, you could just swap to a different melee skill, so that should be fine. What I can talk about, though, is Firestorm. So Firestorm was probably the new skill, rework skill I was most excited for. It now calls down a massive big meteor, then a series of smaller meteors afterwards. It looked great. It looks really satisfying to play. I was like, I'm definitely going to go Firestorm as my league starter. The numbers just don't look good. So, It's now level 28 gems instead of level 12. Mana cost is 25, level 20. Meh. Now has added damage effectiveness of 50%. Now deals up to 311 fire damage. Now has a base duration of 1.4 seconds with 1 impact every 0.2. And the first hit will take 0.2 seconds. First impact now is 100% more AoE and deals 150% more damage. So what does that mean? So it's roughly 770 base damage with 125% damage effectiveness for the first hit, which is really low, considering it also has a delay. It doesn't have the fastest cast time. It's got a 0.75 cast time. It is the same cast time as Fireball, which is pretty slow, but Fireball has a damage effectiveness of 240%, and it has a base of 1,643. Now, yes, Firestorm does have all the little hits that could hit afterwards, and you're like, well, if those all hit, it's something like 2,600, I think, but they won't all hit, and that requires waiting up to 1.4 seconds, and there's a limit of 3 of the little Firestorms going. So you can't, like, yeah. You can't pre-stack a bunch of Firestorms as much. The numbers are just a bit low. You also need to keep in mind that Flame War, which is this really exciting new skill, which adds a bunch of flat damage, only adds to projectiles, and Firestorm isn't a projectile. So for map clear, yes, it will have the advantage that you're just doing big AoEs, so you don't need to worry about like pierces, and it's a ground targeted effect. But I do wish the numbers were higher. I was kind of hoping for numbers that were comparable to Fireball. Maybe not as much, because it has the after effects. I was hoping more maybe like 1.2k base, maybe like a slightly smaller initial hit than Fireball. And then it's got powerful after effects. It's also worth noting that Fireball has got Ignite scaling. The new Firestorm has no Ignite scaling and much lower base damage, so definitely don't do Ignite Firestorm. If you want to do that, just play Ignite Armageddon brand. Yeah, not very happy with Firestorm, unfortunately, when I was very excited for it. GC. GC is maybe interesting. I would have to see how it feels with a knockback. So the way it works now is there are larger like individual areas, like 1, 2, 3 kind of thing. And it has inbuilt knockback, and the final, it's basically like Spell Sunder. The final like explosion effect has 200% more damage, which sounds great. Sounds super exciting. So I've got 100% of Fizz to Cold. They've buffed the cast time by 0.10. All seems really good. But if the knockback thing means that, if you assuming you're self-cast, because they're kind of trying to promote like self-cast maybe totems, because of the cast time buff. If the knockback means you're always getting the final spike, that's great, but that might stop you from getting more of the overlaps that you did before. So it depends. It's really going to have to see how it feels. There aren't that many like interesting cold skills, so more cold skills are always cool. I could maybe see a self-cast GC build be good. Having on-demand knockback is also very safe. When you combine knockback and freeze, that's a lot of cool defensive layers built in. But yeah, not sure how it will compare to just a standard like Frostbolt Ice Nova character, for example. Discharge. Discharge has very big numbers now. It's got 450 damage effectiveness, and it's got really high base fire, very high base lightning. I could definitely see some like Stormfire, Archmage, Discharge, Ignite memes. It does have a base cooldown though. They've shown a video, and it looked pretty slow in the video. We'd have to see the actual gem numbers to see what that cooldown is, what that cooldown goes down to. But yeah, the cooldown looked very rough. There's also going to be a Threshold Jewel, which removes the cooldown, but it will nerf the damage, and we don't know the numbers on that. So until we see the actual numbers on Discharge, it's hard to evaluate. But yeah, you could potentially have some really big hits, and it also has 20% increased AoE per charge. So if you're getting crazy amount of charge, you have crazy AoE, which is pretty cool. Next up is Vitality. Vitality is pretty exciting. So Vitality is now at level 10 gem. It gives up to 247 regen for only 233 mana, which is really good. Some people have said this seems underwhelming. No, this is great. If you've got 6k life, which is pretty average for like a lot of builds to get around 6k life, this is roughly 4% life. 4% life regen for 233 mana is really strong. This is also great for anything like Mind Over Matter. The smaller your life pool, the better this is, basically. Getting sustain is always great, and even just as like a solid leveling gem, really nice getting some early sustain going for them, early labs, early trials, whatever. Really, really nice. This is yeah, big thumbs up. Like this a lot. Next up is Ball Lightning for the interesting things. So they said that Ball Lightning was receiving a slight nerf. Ball Lightning is still fine, but slight. I would like to know the justification behind that word. So the base radius has been nerfed by 4, and it lost like 100 top end. Now, if you actually look at old Ball Lightning, it's basically going back to old Ball Lightning numbers in 3.11. It's gained 10% damage effectiveness, but it's worth noting that they buffed Ball Lightning in Harvest because they nerfed the slower proj interaction. So it will have slightly worse damage than it did in like 3.10. So it will still be good. While this is a very big nerf, it did receive a very big buff. It will still do very good single target. In my opinion, the biggest problem is actually the radius change. Radius changing is like, I would have rather they just hit the damage harder. Radius change is always still you might need to get more sweet points for the tick rate. It all depends on how much projectile speed you've got. It's a whole thing, but yeah. I hate radius nerfs. Curses. There's a bunch of curse things. It's hard to really talk about the curse stuff because we don't actually know what Doom does. So basically, if you self-cast a curse, the curse gains Doom stacks per second, making the curse more powerful, but we don't know what, like, the Doom cap is. So until we know, like, all the numbers behind Doom, it's hard for me to evaluate the curses, because it could be, like, 20% more effective, or, like, 1,000, it won't be, but, like, 1,000% more effective, so I can't really evaluate it. What I can say, though, is they've nerfed Enfeeble. Enfeeble no longer has curse enemies have reduced crit chance or crit multi. Also worth noting, they have removed the curse penalty on uniques. If I read that correctly earlier. I'm sure someone will correct me if I'm wrong. So, curses maybe better, maybe worse. Yeah. Depends. All of the elemental ones now have like a flat 25% chance to inflict their ailment, which is nice. They're up from 14. Always good. Temp Chains is better for rares and uniques, worse for trash. But maybe the Doom thing evens out. Vulnerability is interesting. Vulnerability now causes ailments to deal damage 20% faster. So great for Ignite, great for Bleed, but it lost a bunch of Fizz scaling. This is probably still a net buff for Bleed, but it isn't as huge because you also lost the Maim, but you had other sources of Maim. I think Bleed is still up, and Bleed was still really strong, so even if they did nerf it, Bleed builds are still fine. And this also scales with Curse Effect, and this will also scale with Doom, I believe. So yeah, Vulnerability is great. There's something I will talk about later which changes how good this next sentence could be, but you could theoretically do a Tri-Curse Ignite build using Flammability, Ellie Weakness, and Vulnerability, and that would feel tasty. That would feel really, really good. Oh. The Val Impurity stuff is mostly people who are cheesing immunity builds, so that's kind of whatever. Not as great for poison. The reason why I left it out is for poison, you want longer duration poisons to stack more, so if you make the poison shorter, getting less stacking, it's kind of a buff, kind of a what it's kind of messy. Spell Slinger, right? Okay, Spell Slinger is the main thing. We've already spoken about how intensity is better now. Right, I'm gonna upset a lot of people when I say this, but there isn't really much to talk about, so screw it. Spell Slinger shouldn't exist. I don't understand the point of Spell Slinger. Basically, GGG doesn't like automation. They try and promote self-cast, and then they made Spell Slinger, which made everyone automate spells, and it was really good. So they've nerfed it pretty substantially. It was one of the best ways of leveling spellcasters, and then it like fell off into red maps because you lost out on damage because you had to use up gems. Now they've nerfed it really hard for leveling, and like Chaos Spell Slingers are kind of awkward working out their reservations. Cold Spell Slingers, I think, are still fine. I don't know. Basically, Spell Slinger builds are harder to do, but to be honest, I think Spell Slinger should have never existed, and they should have just made Poet's Pen really fun for people who want to do Poet's Pen stuff. And to be honest, nearly all of this stuff is happening because of Volatile Dead, and they didn't nerf Volatile Dead. Volatile Dead Spell Slinger will still be good. because it was ridiculous, and even with the nerfs, it's still... Screw Spell Slinger. Right, next up, the curse stuff is all, like, shuffled about. So, Whispers of Doom is now basically where Hexmaster is. They've kind of done the old, like, swap of the Rooney. Hexmaster is now where Corruption is, and Corruption is moved where Hexmaster is. Skittering Runes is now over here, and there's a new curse cluster here. So all the curse stuff has kind of just had a bit of a shuffle. Once we get the passive skill tree, and we know exactly how the whole Doom numbers work and all that stuff, we can really evaluate it. Some builds which initially lose out, again, as I said, Ignite. If Wisp of Doom stayed where it was, with the vulnerability change, it would have been a really good time to play Ignite, because you'd have had access to Breath of Flames, Holy Fire, so you're in this part of the tree anyway. You're getting the nice little cluster jewels, and then you're picking up the extra curse. It would have been super tasty. Super, super tasty. But now it's over here, which... It's really good for Chaos dot builds, which didn't travel left, which was quite a lot, like Caustic Arrow, Toxic Rain, anything which took Atrophy. Great for those builds. But those builds only have Despair as an offensive curse. So, yeah, it's kind of... The curse stuff is a bit of a... I'd need to see it. I don't know if it's really a buff. Ascendancy stuff that I can talk about. So they've nerfed some Ascendancies. However, all the Ascendancies they nerfed are still fine. So, Assassin, it used to have 2% base crit with maximum power charges, now 1.5. That is a big nerf, but still fine. And 5 multi from 8, which, if you're stacking, like, Void Batteries, the more power charges you stack, the more you feel this nerf. This basically promotes you not stacking power charges. I could also see a world where you just don't take Deadly Infusion, and you instead take... Ambush and Assassinate, so Ambush, Assassinate, Opportunistic, Unsable Infusion, and Mistwalker. I could definitely see that being perfectly viable. I think Assassin's still great if you take Deadly Infusion, and these nodes also lost some multi. If you stick to only doing Deadly Infusion, Opportunistic, and Mistwalker, then you're only getting nerf on one of the multi-nodes, because it's these two multi-nodes that got hit. Yeah, Assassin's still fine. Assassin's still good. Necro got nerfed. So, Necro went from 75% offering effect down to 50. It was 50 before, and it was great. Same for Ascendant. Bone offering was great when it used to be 50. And, yeah. Only really matters for the whole glancing blows thing, which I'll get into in a bit later. But yeah, Necros are still fine. Assassins are still great. Ascendant Necros are still great. They're fine. I'm gonna say this, though. It really sucks we didn't see any Occultist changes. Occultist has been a annoying Ascendancy for quite a long time. They've put this massive focus on curses. Now's the time that you touch the Occultist Ascendancy, because there's a thing which happens to me a lot where I want to play a curse-based character, but I want to play a non-cold or non-chaos Occultist, and then it's like, okay, so I take these nodes, and then what? There's the crit stuff, which isn't that great, and that's only good if you're going crit, and if you are going crit, it's not that strong. And then there's a random ES 2-pointer. It needs more generic. Like, they could have added a Doom. They could have added something for Dooms. They could have added something for self-cast cursing. They could have just added more ES stuff. They could have made Forbidden Power more. Like, they should have they really should have. I know working from home, but if there was ever a time to touch it, now is the time to touch it. It sucks they didn't. Please, someone touch Occultist consensually. Yeah, that kind of sucks. Glancing Blows. So, a lot of people have been talking about the Glancing Blows nerf. I spoke about the Glancing Blows nerf quite a lot in my video yesterday from the Balance Manifesto. TLDR, it now causes you to take 65% of damage from blocked hits, not 50. Okay. They should have, in my opinion, hit life recovery. That's a separate issue. A lot of people have been saying that this is really bad because, on average, you take more damage if you've only got, like, 30% block. One thing which isn't really being appreciated, though, is it does even out your damage intake. Even if, on average, you're taking more damage than completely blocking something and taking no damage, reducing the spikiness and smoothing out damage is great. Anyone who's ever, like, tanked or healed in an MMO can tell you want smooth damage, not spiky damage. Even if on average you're taking more damage, smoothing it out makes sustain much easier. It reduces the likelihood of one-shots. So there is still a reason to take glancing blows, but it's also been moved. Now, we don't know if they mean they moved it as in they, like, moved it to a different part of the tree, or if they moved it as in they just, like, put it from here to here, because it will no longer get Thread of Hoped. So, yeah. Glancing Blows is a lot worse than it was, obviously. I do think they should have hit the life recovery, but people aren't appreciating the smoothing out the damage, because smoothing out the damage is actually still beneficial. Like, there is still reason to take Glancing Blows. Yeah. The Divine Flesh thing I spoke about it yesterday, it's still great. You now need to invest into maximum Chaos Res, though. It's still very powerful defensive stuff. And honestly, the only other super interesting thing in all of this is Chimera's Avarice now has Icicles on hit rather than on kill. Anything where you move a on kill effect to on hit effect is great. I missed out the important thing, though. I missed out a few important things. Sorry, I didn't scroll down to my second page of notes. Watcher's Eye nerfs. Watcher's Eye, they're all fine, in my opinion, to be honest. Now 10 to 15 recovery from 20 to 30. It's still a really good node. With Watcher's Eye, in theory, it's making auras you already run better. So if you're already running the aura, it doesn't matter if they nerfed the node by 50% for, like, effect. It's still just, like, a benefit. So whatever. But yeah, basically stuff kind of got halved, or, like, you know, 10 to 15, 20 to 30. 1.5. They're all fair changes. They're all fair, in my opinion. Whispering Ice is dead. Some people have tried to tell me that it's not that bad. They've basically doubled the damage, roughly doubled the damage, but it now has a maximum of 5 storms at a time. This is, if you've in theory got enough burst damage that you can kill everything in the game with those 5 storms, then this is a huge buff. If 5 storms is enough damage for you to kill everything, great. However, things to keep in mind, if you're using, for example, Awakened Spell Cascade, then this is potentially a huge nerf to your map clear, because you cast once, which drops your 5, you move to the next pack, you cast once, and then the 5 you just cast disappear, because you only have 5 out at once. So if you're clearing maps, like if you're running super fast, you might have an issue where, like, you're deleting your old Ice Storms before you've killed all the packs. A huge potential single target nerf because you can't stack up like 50 or 100. Potential huge nerf to speed map clear. Also a huge nerf if you're someone who likes to do stuff like blighted maps and just like cover multiple areas of like zone denial. Yeah, it's just F. It's a big F. Redemption Spectres. Redemption's Sentries and Knights, both of them have approximately 33% less life and damage than before. They'd probably still be really good, but yeah. Cannibals, this could be spicy, potentially. Cannibals no longer have an extended wind-up before they throw their stones. Maybe Cannibals are just going to be really spooky. Who knows? Zana mods. Zana mods are fun. Good league for Fortune Favors the Brave. Delirium at 16. Cool. I generally think you might just be a Fortune Favors the Brave league. I feel like if you're super juicing maps, I spoke to Grimmer about it. He said he'd probably rather just run Beyond on them. So yeah, 16 Chaos is a lot. Worth mentioning, Blight Balance changes. A bunch of the Blight Towers have been buffed. Basically, Arc, Shock, Chilling, Seismic, Minion, Freezebolt, Stone Gaze, and Scouts are all much better. This is all huge. And the final thing worth noting that really stood out to me, of all the new fire skills and fire reworks, Marauder doesn't get any of them on vendor or reward. So if you're planning on doing a Firestorm Chieftain League start, which is what I was planning on doing, definitely don't do that, because Firestorm feels and you won't get access to Firestorm till Syosa, which, just don't do that. But yes, I'm Tarke. We will do a separate video once we have the gem numbers. I'm mostly holding out for Blazing Salvo at this point. Crackling Lance could be cool, but I feel like that's a skill that you're going to have to play to really evaluate it. For people saying what Ascendancy would we go for correctly lance, that's been like the #1 question I've gotten. Probably Inquiz or Assassin. If you're super afraid of Assassin because it got nerfed, go Inquiz. But yes, I'm Tarke. Have a good day. Let me know what you think about these patch notes. By the way, also, we plan to do a patch note review Bay class tomorrow. I'm potentially delaying it by 1 day so we can also talk about all the gem stuff. Yes. I'll let you know once that's confirmed, but I'm Tarke. Have a good day. Bye-bye.